Alright, what could be more relaxing than being in a body of water and having no other noise other than the waves crashing and those around you? For me, it's being on the wave for those few moments. And surfing has greatly evolved since the times of the early Polynesians, and I understand that not all of you can relate to being or to surfing and being in the water, but perhaps you can put yourself in your escape or your quiet place. After doing some research, I after doing some research on the beginnings of surfing for the past couple weeks and being involved with the sport for several years, I'd like to share with you why or how surfing has evolved since the times of the early Polynesians, and how the invention of the wetsuit, and how surfboards have changed, and how technology has affected surfing as well. The early Hawaiians are responsible for starting the sport we now call surfing, and a site by the site name Club of the Waves states that the first known occurrences of surfing are connected to the ancient Hawaiian tradition of hi'i nalu, meaning wave sliding. And for this ancient Hawaiian culture, surfing the sea had an attached persona, which kahunas or priests would pray, and those would bring good waves, and would allow everyone to surf and hopefully have a good day. But this early form of wave sliding, however, did not hold the same recreational value as it does today. And for example, Club of the Waves also states that the sport served as a training exercise meant to keep chiefs in top condition, and also served as a system of conflict resolution, and members of the affluent classes would test their skills in competitions where wealth, pride, and even romance were at stake. And here's an example of an early Polynesian surfer, and this is just, I guess, like a cartoon animation type deal, showing, I guess, a competition. And as these competitive values were withheld in later times, there's a desire to find a way to be able to surf year-round where conditions were not permit. And a man by the name Jack O'Neill wanted to find a way to endure the freezing waters of San Francisco. And as with any experiment, trial and error is inevitable. And O'Neill's first attempt at creating a wetsuit involved he stuffed PVC into his board shorts to keep the water in there so that it could recirculate and stay warm with his body heat. And even though these board shorts worked well enough for him to start a family, these board shorts worked well enough for Jack to start a family with his wife, but early wetsuits took a step forward when his buddy showed him a sample of neoprene. And it's actually on the next slide, but this is Jack O'Neill and one of his early surf shops. And a lot of people doubted his invention and said that it wouldn't sell, but he was just looking for a way to stay warm and also support his family. And he later moved his surf shop to Santa Cruz, that's the later surf shop. And he actually started selling so many wetsuits that he moved his warehouse to the southeast side of town and put all 6 of his children to work. And Surfline states that by 2010, O'Neill was the best-selling wetsuit brand in the world, as well as one of the top sportswear brands, and has licenses in over 67 countries. And as more favorable conditions were made surfable to the wetsuit, there was a need and desire to figure out how to surf those certain conditions that Mother Nature provided us with. And in the first stage of the surfing, going kind of backwards, but this is him showing an example of the neoprene, and an early example of the wetsuit, which is also inflatable. All About Surfboard states that after some time during the 1920s, a man by the name of Tom Blake figured he could create a lighter board by putting woods into the board and applying a thin sheet of wood over, which this is the hollowed out board. And Tom Blake's also the man for creating the fin, where Jenna Goldberg from the Inertia states that he took the keel or fin off of a speedboat in Honolulu Harbor and screwed that into a surfboard, which allowed for more maneuverability, better control, and decreased the chances of sliding out. And it should come as no surprise that since the 1930s, surfboards have come a long way, where not only modern boards are shorter and made out of foam, but the fins are also made out of anything from carbon fiber to fiberglass with a bamboo core, which allows for the board to, I guess, react to the surfers' movements depending on the conditions, and to be able to ride to its fullest capabilities. And now that the boards and wetsuits have been optimized for the best conditions, we have technology. And a company named Surfline actually started this in the 1980s, where they would have a pay per call service where surfers would call and they would get the report rather than earlier on. Someone would have to call their buddy at the beach, and the name, that's where Surf's Up came from. Because they would call and then someone would say, oh, Surf's Up, like, it's good, like, come out. And in the late 1980s, when phones became more available, well, never mind. But when fax machines came out, they came out with this thing called the wave fax, where they would record the surf and it would call fax machines overnight and let everyone know how it's going to be for the next few days or whatever. And lastly, we have the internet, and where everyone has a smartphone. Surfline actually has live cameras where you can look at a lot of locations over the world and see what's going on. And technology has allowed us, everyone has a smartphone, so you can actually plan your trip now instead of going up or not traveling, like, let's say 3 hours away and being disappointed when you get there. And you can check your phone and say, oh, I can go around this time, and if it's not good when you're there, you won't be as disappointed. And also, or in conclusion, I should say, over the years, surfing's withheld its competitive values in competitions such as US Open and Pipeline Masters, and continue to change throughout the years, including wetsuits, boards, and fins. And to be honest, I have no idea where it's going to go in the next few years, but time will tell. Thank you.
All right, Chelsea, what did you think?
I thought the topic was interesting, but I was a little confused with the images because he would say something and then he would go and say the topics would be about the other topic that was next, and so he'd keep going back and forth with his topics, and he was a little shaky, but he got better as he went, I think, with his speech.
All right. Did you think the information was pretty well cited?
I think some of it had a citation, but not all of what he gave did.
Okay. All right. Well, I like the visualization that you have at the beginning. Where are you? I knew you're. Oh, you're right in front of me. The snake. I wouldn't let you sit there. You've got a nice visualization and an image to kind of draw us in, and it kind of explains why you're talking about it. You do mention a little bit about your background to kind of give you some credibility on that. I didn't think that your purpose statement was very clear, but you did have a pretty well laid out preview of what the supporting material was going to be. So I know what the subject is. I don't know exactly what the ultimate goal is and how the three things that you end up talking about are connected to each other. I can kind of invent a reason that they all fit together, but you should be clearer on that at the beginning of the speech. And I don't know if it's just that it zipped by and it was under the radar, or if it just wasn't very clear when you presented it, but it didn't feel, like I said, as focused at the beginning. All of the individual points, though, are they're identifiable, they're distinct. That's easy to see, and I think that helps give the speech some pretty logical structure. At the beginning, you had some historical information that you provided a little bit of citation on. I didn't hear quite as many citations during the rest of the presentation as I did early on, and I think you want to be more consistent about that. Even though the points are distinct, it's kind of a topical method of organization. I did think that the movement between the points was sometimes a little bit abrupt. It's like, whoa, why are we all of a sudden in this particular topic? It just seemed like there was no connection to the previous topic. I knew that we were suddenly in a different topic, but it felt sort of like sharp left turn here, and now we're talking about something else. And so you need to be a little bit smoother about making those transitions, giving us an explanation about why we're going to that next point as you're moving to that point to connect everything together. Otherwise, it just feels a little disjointed. So that was a little bit of a problem. I know what Chelsea's talking about on the visuals. I think you probably do too. Sometimes things were just not synced up, and you had more images of one thing than you were expecting, and then sometimes you were having to go back. That's something that practice would take care of. I would say cut out. Jack O'Neill's an important person, but cut out all the stuff about his shop, his family, and those pictures, and let's focus on what it is that he invented. So get those pictures up there first. Give it. I wanted to see that early. Shirt that you were talking about. I wanted to see an image of that, and then I wanted to see the neoprene thing that came up later. Like I said, is a little bit out of sequence on that point, and those are the things that are important about him in the industry and the things that you're talking about. So I think that could have used a little bit of trimming, cut down a couple of the visuals there, and made it easier for you to focus and for us to focus on what you were trying to talk about on that particular point. So I think the points that you picked are good, and that you had some nice visuals on each of them. And like I said, I think that there are a couple of visuals that emphasize that, but they get sort of lost in the clutter of the other things. The board technology, I could have used a little bit more information on, especially when you're talking about the fins. I saw the first reference that you made, and then there's a later one, and I wanted to know a little bit more about how they worked and what's different about them and that kind of thing, and that felt a little bit underdeveloped, that particular section. And then the last section I think is an interesting section that you've got here. It feels a little bit like it's the one that you've practiced the least. It's not that there's not good information there, but it should be kind of a chronological presentation, and it feels sort of like you needed another run through or two to make it work quite as well, because I think that there's logical structure that you've got there and some good information, but maybe practice would make it flow a little bit more smoothly and make a little bit more sense. It did feel sometimes like it was, well, here's a random piece of information instead of, there's really a way that this technology developed to enhance the surfing experience for people, that sort of thing. It went from back in the 60s when people were calling each other, hey, surf's up, come on down to the beach kind of thing, to, actually having reports that they could check in on, and that sort of thing. And you'd have radio reports, and you guys probably don't even remember the surf reports coming up on the news or on the radio. That used to do that all the time on the local radio stations, giving the surf reports every day. And of course now you've got to talk about that new technology. So it does flow together. It just needed a little bit of polish on those sorts of things. Again, I think everybody's doing a good job. I know that sometimes I sound like I'm critical. I'm just trying to find all the things that you could do better. There's a lot of stuff in the speech that's very good. So if it sounds like I'm coming down on you, I'm not. Most of what you did was really solid. But there are a couple of things I think that you can pick up on. All right. Thank you.